actually dating Robson for 8 years. Can you speak on your relationship with him and how you know him and how far that goes back, if you may, please?
So he and I met in approximately 1991. We had done a few shoots together, the black or white video, as well as the LA Gear photo shoot. So that was when we had met. And my Uncle Michael, you know, being gracious to both of us, Wade had developed a crush on me and had asked my uncle if he would set up a situation where we could get to know each other better. So we spent about a week together, myself and Wade's family.
Where?
At Neverland. Mm-hmm. So we all went there, spent, like I said, about 5 to 7 days. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that trip is when he asked me to be his girlfriend. So this was, you know, like 91, 92 at the latest, when we really became official and started dating. And this went on until about 2000 or 2001. So we spent our entire teen life together.
Yeah, which was left out of the documentary, of
exactly.
course. Yeah.
Right, and something that was, I mean, we didn't watch the documentary, but after just doing a bunch of research, we know certain things were omitted and the narratives were steered and things like that. Brandi, I want to talk to you about Wade Robinson's 05 testimony, and it's going to lead me to a two-part question, because a lot of what the naysayers about Michael Jackson say after watching Leaving Neverland is why he had children in his room. One thing you guys cannot argue to me is why he had children in his room. So, Brandi, if you don't mind talking about that sworn testimony by Wade Robson in 2005, and then speak on why your uncle had children in his room. And was it just young boys? Was it just more like a sleepover? Just speak on it. Yeah.
So, you know, they were like sleepovers, like slumber parties. And it's not that there were these boys just, you know, haphazardly in his room and spending the night with him. If there were kids there, there was usually multiple kids. And it was rare that he would share the bed with everyone. But, you know, occasionally everybody would just fall asleep watching movies. It was a very normal situation. There wasn't anything sinister about it. And in regards to Wade's testimony in 2005, is there something specific that you're referring to, or just the fact that he testified on behalf of him in general?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, he spoke on the whole room scene in general and said that you were in fact in the room with him, and that, in fact that you were in relationship with him, things that weren't in the documentary. He had no wherewithal in saying at all. Right.
And that's part of the issue that I have with Wade's narrative. He didn't spend time with my uncle alone the way that he said he did. You know, my uncle, first of all, is a very busy man. So when Wade and myself and his family would go to the ranch multiple times a month, my uncle was never there. So it's not that Wade was just being taken away and spending some private special time with my uncle and nobody else was able to access him. My uncle wasn't even at the ranch. This was just time that we all spent together, you know, playing and relaxing at the ranch. So Wade's narrative of him being alone in this room with my uncle is not the way that it happened. And it really makes me sick that he paints it that way, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Right. Can we talk about Michael's character? Because we actually posted an interview we talked about Macaulay Culkin. And he's kind of saying the same things, you know. This was an old interview on Larry King, where, you know, you guys were pretty much, it was like an atmosphere where people were just having fun. Talk about Michael's character, because I hear people always saying that he likes to he's like a big kid himself. Can you guys speak on that, how you know him?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, the reason I was laughing because it brings back actually really good memories. I mean, we had pie fights, we had water balloon fights. We would, I shouldn't say this, but we would drive by certain places and throw stink bombs at people, you know, and then just crack up and laugh, you know. It was very, very fun, but at the same time, you know, it made me want to be a big kid for the rest of my life. And I've actually lived that way in terms of, you know, I don't want to grow up like everyone else, you know, what a grown up is, you know.
What society says.
Yeah, what society says a grown up is. I think being a child at heart, you know, you're taught racism. You know, a child isn't born a racist. They're taught it, you know, or you're taught about money and you're taught about, you know, all these things. And so for me, I wanted to always be a big kid and be innocent like my uncle was in terms of an innocent heart. And I think was his downfall, is that people can't identify with that now. They don't have that in them. They don't see that. They don't see that. They're like, well, you know, you said bed, so it has to be sexual. It has to be this, right. You know. Well, to me and growing up in that, I watched The Exorcist on, with my uncle on his bed with my brothers. It's like there was nothing sinister about that, but if I now it would sound, like people would think it would sound.
Right. Just to extend on that, Taj, you said something on your Twitter that kind of resounded to me, and I want you to kind of extend on what you're saying now. You said a lot of the media are using different rules and guidelines for MJ in a desperate effort to rewrite history and his innocence. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I think, the thing with my uncle is he knew what the barriers he was breaking in terms of, the awards he was breaking, the milestones he was breaking. He knew his job in that. He knew that he was breaking racial barriers in terms of the industry all over the world. But he also knew that he was a target in that way. And when we were brought up, he reminded us constantly. He said, because of your race, you're going to have to be 2 to 3 times better than other people are to get that same credit. He would tell us that all along, and he would say, watch, they're not going to give me this credit because they're going to give it to someone else. And we would see it. And that's what's happening now. They're trying to bury his legacy to make other people look better. And it's disgraceful. And, part of me is angry because we're helping them in a way, and I think that's been the biggest problem. Instead of giving someone the benefit of the doubt or looking for evidence or facts, they're just jumping on the bandwagon.
Right. Yeah. Now, from what I hear, were one of, if not both of you, supposed to do an interview on Good Morning America or something like that, and they rejected you. Is that true? Any truth to that?
Yeah.
We were both supposed to do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Could you speak on that in the media, of steering the narrative?
Yeah. And I won't reference them specifically, but as a whole, it's been very difficult to get this message out.
From the mainstream media.
Yeah. They won't take the story. Even though they understand that there are things missing from Wade and James's story, they're still running with it as though it's a factual piece of film.
Yeah.
So when we're trying to tell our side and tell our story, what we want the public to know about them, we're just being shut down, and it's very difficult to see this happen.
Yeah. And it's obvious to us, this is something that has always happened in that way. Is they have their narrative and they're going to stay with that narrative. I feel that Brandi is kind of Wade's kryptonite, and they've already claimed that Wade is the person they're going to go with. So Brandi's kept out of everything in terms of that. No one wants to interview Brandi in the mainstream media. So it's very frustrating for me to see that as well, especially someone that has dated someone for 8 years during that time period that they're alluding to. That is, to me, is ridiculous.
Now, Brandi, just talk about, Robson, and also, a little later, I want you guys to talk about, since Robson so much, some of the inconsistencies. Well, talk about him. Like, did you ever think that he would be, the type of guy, that would turn on the family? Because what type of guy is Robson? Could you speak on your relationship with him?
Yeah. So, it surprises me that he's doing this, that he's saying these things about my uncle. But his behavior overall doesn't surprise me. He has always been very narcissistic and very egocentric. He's a very self-centered person. So whenever he wants something, he doesn't really care who he's going to hurt in order to get it. Would I expect him to say that my uncle did these things to him? Absolutely not. They had a great friendship, a business relationship. I know for a fact that nothing inappropriate has ever happened to him. So for him to make these stories up, it's a testament to who he truly is. Yeah. And part of the reason why I had to break up with him was because of the way that he was treating me at the time. Sleeping with, there's a list of women I wish that I could list to you, but I'll list the one that everybody's familiar with. Sleeping with Britney Spears, the way that he did when she was already in a relationship with his friend is like the start of how he started to become the person that he is. I just have to say he has no type of remorse for anything he's ever done.
Yeah, he sees what he wants and he goes after it, and he doesn't care who he hurts, which is basically what he's doing now. And I think there's a sense of entitlement, to be honest. My uncle was very good to him, just like he was very good to us. But, once that stopped, all of a sudden, he feels entitled. He said, hey, look, I was the first defense witness in 2005. You owe me. That's what it seems like to me. he's basically saying, you guys owe me now.
And you know, to piggyback on that, in 2009, shortly after my uncle passed away, I hadn't spoken to Wade and his family for years at this point, about 4 or 5 years at least. And his mother reached out to me first in attempts to get close to Paris, Prince, and Blanket. That was her mission, trying to figure out how to get these kids into her life. And then when I wouldn't budge on that, the next thing I knew was Wade was calling me, trying to figure out how to get back close to Paris, Prince, and Blanket.
Yeah.
You know, and this is immediately after my uncle passes. If this is somebody that had been abusing you the way that you are now claiming he has, I can't imagine that this would have been at the forefront of your goals.
Yeah. And he went to the memorial. I mean, there's just a lot of things that are, I don't even want to say inconsistent. They're just like, I mean, they're common sense things.
And this was him as a grown man. This isn't him as a child trying, you know, not understanding what had happened to him. This is him as a full grown man.
Yeah.
Going through the years, knowing your uncle and hearing all these allegations, but from the outside looking in, just seeing nothing but love and just positivity come out of him and exuberate through him. How did he deal with all that backlash and all that negativity? Did it take its toll on him?
I think it did. I mean, I was around for 2005. I honestly feel that the 2005 trial killed him, you know, before he passed. I think it killed his soul. It literally did. Him being there, you saw him deteriorate from that time period for when he first went into the courtroom to when he left. He withered away because it's almost like people chopping at your soul, basically, and knowing that something that you know you did not do, but the world, and I say the world, I'm talking about the media, wants you to be that person, and they're going to paint that picture on you no matter what happens. You know, everything from him getting bit by a spider and then having to appear, you know, in pajamas, that became national. It's like he couldn't win, you know, he found out he had 40 minutes to appear in court, or, you know, and so he came the way he came, and it's like he can't win no matter what happens. And that's the thing with him, is that everything became a fiasco, and they had their mindset already, and it's unfortunate because since I was there, I would talk to Tom Mesereau, which was my uncle's lawyer, every day after court, and I would say, "How'd it go, Tom?" And he would tell me, he's like, "Oh my gosh, we caught this person lying, we caught this person lying, you know, this went well." And then I would turn on the news and I would see the complete opposite, and I'd be like, "Okay, someone here is lying to me," and I'm like, either Tom Mesereau is very comfortable and very, you know, naive, or the media is lying to me. And now I know, and I knew back then which one was the truth. And sure enough, the media was spinning it their own way.
Right. What do you say to the criticism, you know, from people out there who will say, you know, you guys get paid, you know, you're just doing this for money? What do you say to that? You know what I mean? Because I know you guys have had your fair share of criticism, putting yourself out on more and more platforms. Could you please speak to that aspect?
Yeah, you know, we're speaking out on behalf of our uncle because we know the truth. We know this man and what he stood for, and we're not going to sit here and let anybody tell it otherwise. We don't make any money from him, his estate, his legacy, any of those things. This is just out of pure respect and love. You know, when you were raised a certain way, and you were raised to speak out when you know the truth, and that's what we're doing.
Injustice, yeah,
exactly.
And I think anyone, if they had a family member that they were accused of this, and they knew that that was not the truth, they would be doing the same thing we're doing right now. They'd be yelling at the top of their lungs. And so, you know, just because it's Michael Jackson doesn't mean that we're not allowed to do this. You know, and I think that's the biggest lie, is that people want us to be quiet. We're not going to be quiet. And
especially these aren't. You know, this isn't a random person that's making these accusations. Wade and James, we know their history. We know who they are. So that makes it even more personal for us. We understand what their motives are. So we have to speak on that.
Indeed. No, recently.